Welcome to the Leading Together podcast. I'm Sean Lee, joined as always by my co-host, Joe Olig. And today we have an amazing special guest, Leisle Chung. She lives in Colorado Springs, where she leads a mission-driven medical practice called Vanguard Skin Specialists. She started Vanguard in 2009 with her husband, and prior to starting Vanguard, she worked at Bain & Company, where she learned the power of building strong systems. Additionally, she earned her MBA from Harvard. Today, Vanguard has 10 locations in Colorado and has grown to over 150 employees. Leisle, we're so grateful to have you on the show today. How are you doing today?
Sean, I'm doing great, and it is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so glad to have you, and we thought we'd just jump in by asking you, what's bringing you joy these days? It could be a book, a new habit, a new friend or relationship.
Well, you know what, Sean? One of the things that brings me joy every day is that when I drive into work, I have a beautiful view of Pikes Peak and the Front Range in front of me. And it was one of our motivations for moving to Colorado Springs because we wanted to live somewhere beautiful. And I will say every day coming in, I have a beautiful view, and it's just a great way to start the day. It brings me joy.
That's amazing. Is it usually in view, or does cloud cover hit it a lot or sometimes?
Okay, this is what's amazing. It looks different every single day. And so sometimes it's clear, sometimes you get a little bit of clouds, but every day it looks different. The color's different. It could have snow, it may not have snow. And so it's really interesting to look at as you come in.
That's amazing. We have a third business partner who I think moved to Colorado Springs for the same reason.
Mhm.
Josh,
Yeah,
I'm sure
no,
many
gosh.
people that little bit of joy every morning. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, what we'd love to let our audience hear more about the incredible work and mission of Vanguard. Can you just open up by telling us a little about your work and mission?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And let me go back a little ways and tell you how it all got started. So, my husband and I decided that we were going to try to find a place to put down roots and to raise our family. And one of the criteria, as I mentioned before, is it needed to be a beautiful place. And so we visited cities all over the country, came to Colorado Springs. We just fell in love with it. We had no friends, no family out here, but we thought, we could probably convince some to move out here. And in fact, we have. And so we decided to make the move. And for me, I was working in business and I thought, okay, I can always travel or I can find a way to make this work. And for my husband, he is a subspecialty within dermatology. He does skin cancer surgery. And he reached out to every practice in town and he could not find a job. And what's crazy about this is he is someone who got into every college he applied to, every medical school he applied to, every scholarship he applied to. It was actually a little bit annoying. And then it comes time to find a job, and he can't find one. And so the two of us, we just thought, okay, does this mean we don't make the move? And I remember there was a particular position he really wanted, and they called and told him they gave it to somebody else. And so I turned to him that evening, and we had never talked about this before. And I said, what if I take 6 months off and I'll just help you start a practice? And he thought about it for just a few seconds and he said, okay. And that was it.
My gosh.
And so that's how Vanguard Skin Specialist got started. My husband likes to say it started with rejection and failure.
Wow.
And so, so we decided, okay, we're going to come out, we're going to start this practice. And then, of course, it's 2009 in the middle of this economic downturn. And we come out, we subleased 3 exam rooms from another doctor in town. We shared a waiting room. And I thought, I'm just going to help out for a little bit, help them get this small solo practice off the ground. Well, due to a series of events, I ended up needing to stay longer than I originally planned. And then the two of us were having so much fun just doing this that we ended up just continuing to work together. Fortunately, he did not, well, he got busy really quickly. And I think part of it is we just made this commitment that we were going to take care of patients like family. And so that meant, and he still does this, he gives his personal cell phone number to every surgery patient that he sees. And he just takes care of them. And so over time, we have found other doctors who share this view of how we take care of patients, and they have joined us, and that's how we've just grown over time. So today, as you mentioned, we've got 10 different locations throughout southern Colorado. So we start kind of south of Denver, and then we go south from there. And so our entire catchment area is people come from as far as northern New Mexico, and we serve all of southern Colorado. We are in major cities like Colorado Springs, but we really care about also access to care. And so we'll go into underserved markets and take care of patients as well. We do the full suite of dermatology. We also do reconstructive plastic surgery, and we are very well known for just great diagnosis and treatment of skin cancer.
Wow. And can you share a little bit more about the motivation behind I know when we talked before, Liesel, you had a really big heart for reaching people that didn't have access to quality skincare. I'd love to, yeah, hear more about what was that about for you, and so why is that such a driving force behind, like, I think, as I understand it, like even where you decide to open new clinics, right?
That's right. So, uh, well, first, it's driven by the background that my husband and I have. So, he was a refugee from Vietnam. He was one of the boat people. He was rescued out at sea. It's a miracle that he survived that journey. And so he ended up getting rescued at sea by an organization called World Vision. He
Mm.
ended up at a refugee camp in Singapore, and then a small Lutheran church in Arkansas ended up sponsoring his family. And so they ended up in Arkansas. And he grew up as one of 11 kids. His dad, who was a wealthy businessman in Vietnam, lost everything, came to the US, and then he worked on a factory line for the rest of his life. And so, kind of envision refugee family in Arkansas, 11 kids, single blue collar salary. And so, they didn't have great access to care just because they were so limited in their financial resources. And then for me, I grew up in a small town in Arkansas with 1,400 people. So little farming community.
Mhm.
I was 7 years old when my dad got this idea that he was going to move us there. So I grew up in like rural America. I grew up on a farm, and my friends, they mostly worked, like their parents were farmers. And so this was the context in which I grew up. And then my first job outside of my home was at the local doctor's office. And so I got to see what it is when a doctor practices in a small town and what that means for that community. And so when you take my background, my husband's background, and we started this practice, we started in Colorado Springs, but we just had this desire of how do we go out to rural areas that don't have access to care. And if you look at some of the statistics around specialty care and access in rural areas, it looks like you're in a different country. And yet this is America where people
Mhm.
in rural areas don't have access to care. And so that's been the driving reason behind why we've gone out to some of these areas and opened offices.
That's amazing. Uh, So you have this incredible thread that you can pull on for both you and your husband of conviction from your own experiences that tie directly to why you do the work you do. But now you've got 150 employees, right?
Yeah.
How do you help them to feel a sense of meaning and purpose in the work? And I'm kind of related to that. I'm curious about how that might have changed or been more or is more challenging with more and more people, like more and more
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, so you are right on that point. The more you grow, the more challenging it gets. So I'll tell you the things that we've done. I'll also tell you some of the things that help us. So I remember, I think it was around 2017 or 18, we did this internal team satisfaction survey because we do this every single year. And we had just gone through a growth phase. And I read the results of that survey and I thought, oh, these are the worst results we've ever had.
Mhm,
And I think it's because we grew really quickly.
mhm.
And when you do that, I mean, things are a little messy, things are hard, you're breaking processes, having to rebuild them. And it was getting hard, and our team felt it. And then, of course, there were different things that people were asking for. And so, as we were digesting this, we actually made a decision. We thought, okay, one response when you read this is to say, okay, let me try to do all of the things that people were asking for. The other thing, but instead of that, what we said was, you know what? We actually just need to double down on our mission and who we are.
Mm,
So
mm,
if people are complaining, it's really hard to go to these outlying markets, we're not going to try to ease that.
mhm,
Or, and so instead, let's just double down and let's just talk mission
mhm,
over and over again. And let's talk values over and over again. And let's create the moments in our practice where we celebrate anytime we feel like we've done something hard, but it's in
mhm,
service of our patients and our mission and values. And so we just doubled down and said, this is how we're going to address this. Um, but the other thing that really helps us is because we're a medical practice, people see the direct impact of the care that they're providing, at least if you're one of the frontline team members and you're in the clinic and you see it. And I'm really grateful because I think we have a lot of people who see medicine as a calling. And because of that, they feel like, okay, the work that I do every single day makes a difference. Now, I've got to tie that all the way back, though, because I've also got folks who work in the finance department or who are handling our medical claims. And so we try to tell the stories over and over again of this is what we're doing for patients so that everyone understands this is only possible because of every position. Um, our mission, though, is not just our patients. We talk about making a positive impact. And by impact, I mean when two objects collide, you have a change in trajectory. And so positive impact on our patients, community, and world. And so we're
mm,
trying to change trajectory in a positive way for our patients, community, and world. And of course, when two objects collide, it changes trajectory of both of those objects. And
mm.
so we also hope it changes us. And so part of our mission is our patients, and that it's easier. We can talk about that day in and day out. We see it every single
Mhm.
day. But then there's also the piece around our community and world, because we also partner with organizations in our community. And then for the world, we will take teams out to see the projects that we sponsor around the world so that they can bring those stories back. So we try to make it as real and as tangible as possible for our team.
Lisa, I want to go back to something that you shared earlier about the team satisfaction survey. It's
Yeah.
it's so common for leaders that we work with, and if they're listening, most likely can identify with that moment where you're looking at some employee engagement or satisfaction data, and it's not good, and you feel like, how are we going to respond, right? Like, what's the action plan? What are all the things that we're going to do that are going to show that we're responding to these specific pieces of feedback? Your approach here is a bit counterintuitive, right? In that you sort of said, this is true, we see this, but we sort of doubled down on identity. Like, what drove that, and what ended up being the outcome?
Yeah. So, okay, my husband was an athlete, so he loves like sports and sports analogies.
Uh,
And
Speaking our language.
yeah. So I think it was he's gonna know these analogies better than me, but I think it was Lou Holtz, Notre Dame, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he talked about how when people come and join his team, they come to become Notre Dame.
Mm. Mhm.
It's not that the team's going to shift to try to become their players. Instead, the players come and they join in order to become Notre Dame. And so for us, as we thought about it, we thought, you know what? We could do all these things and try to make everyone happy, but instead we need to be crystal clear of this is who we are. And when
Yeah.
you come to become Vanguard. We're
Yeah.
not shifting to try to become you. You come to become Vanguard. And for some people, what we're doing is going to resonate with them. And they're the ones that we want on our team. And for some people, they might say, you know what? I just want a job. I just want to
Mhm.
clock in, clock out, go home. That's what I'm looking for. That's not who we are. We are a mission driven practice. We're not for people who just want a job. We're for people who say, I want to come in and I'm going to take care of patients. I'm going to go to underserved areas. I'm not going to take the easy path, but instead I'm going to go above and beyond to take care of patients like family, because that's who we are. And so as we looked at all these results and we were like, okay, when people are upset, what are they upset about? And we thought,
Yeah.
we can't fix that. It's actually counterintuitive to who we are. Like if they don't like it that oh, we're going to this area and I'm so tired at the end of the day. We
Yeah.
can't fix that. And so instead, let's be really clear. And what we can fix is we owe it to our team to
Uh-huh.
tell them why their work is important.
Uh-huh.
And so that we can do a better job at. And so we said, let's double down on mission and then let's do a better job as a leadership team communicating to people why this work matters. And so, for instance, like here's one of the things we did coming out of that. We were sponsoring projects overseas. They were in places like Cambodia, Rwanda. It was 36 hours door to door for one of our projects.
Uh-huh.
And so we said, okay, we're not going to abandon some of the projects that we've got going, but we've also got to bring some of our international work closer to where we are so that
Uh-huh.
we can start to take teams out. And when we
Yeah.
talk about positive impact on patients, community, and world, they can see the world piece of it. And so we kicked off, all right, let's start taking people out to the field. And and people have also asked me, they've said, isn't it just much more efficient to just donate that money? Well, yes, I absolutely see the argument for that. But I will say it made such a difference in our culture to have people go see the work and say, okay, I get it. When we talk about how people don't have access to clean water and that medical clinics don't have access to clean water, okay, I've seen it. I get it. I can see why we're doing this work. And so we did try to start doing a better job of making people see the connections in the mission that we have to day-to-day work.
Lisa, I just want to commend you because I think, I mean, as Joe was sharing there, I was on the same wavelength thinking about how many times we've come alongside a senior leadership team and, or maybe just not for the explicit purpose of helping them to unpack like data like you were, but we're just hearing about it in relationship with them. And I think like a lot of their reactions are, and I think I can relate too, feeling like I've got to respond to everything and
Yeah,
y'all showed some real wisdom and discernment in saying, like, we're going to focus on a couple things. We're going to focus on what matters most. And, that's not to say like maybe some tactical things didn't come out of that, but I think there's a lot of wisdom for our listeners to hear, you know, sometimes we need to go to the thing that's most important and elevate that and repeat it to our people. So thank you for sharing that example. That's really powerful.
One, I think to call out, if you're listening, what you've heard is just how strong your identity is at Vanguard, right? I
Hmm.
mean, if you've been
Yeah.
listening, you can feel that identity come into life in what you shared, earlier, a place, where patients are treated like family, right? Like there is such strong identity. If you don't have that, and that's what you turn to, then you need to work to build it, right? But in that moment, because your identity was so strong, right, you're able to turn back to that and anchor and recommit, right? And use that as the way to bring out the best in the people inside of your organization, right? And if they in those moments choose to move on, or right, move into a different place because they're not feeling that connection to that identity, then as you've called out, like then that's okay, right? But because your identity was so strong in that moment, you're able to turn to it in these moments of challenge, struggle, right? In ways that organizations who don't have that clearly and meaningfully defined wouldn't be able to do in the same way. It's
yeah.
powerful.
Well, we actually had a recent survey, and there was a comment, and one of our team members here, we were discussing this because the comment was something along the lines of how our culture here is so strong that sometimes it could feel like a cult. And we were like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then ultimately we said, okay, let's just take that as a compliment.
Yeah, right. One of those good healthy cults. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lisa, I also just want to say I really appreciate you try to remember your husband's sports analogies. It makes me. I think later I'm going to quiz my wife and on Coach Popovich or something about the Bears and see if she's been listening to my leadership sports metaphors.
That's great.
Um, well, switching gears here a little bit, I know when we talked before, Lisa, preparing for this interview, one of the things that really struck me is how honest you were about the fact that growing Vanguard to become what it's become was not always easy. And there were some bumps in the road. And I think what struck with me is that you even reflected on how I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'll let you cleaning this up, but that you got to a point where something seemed out of balance, like in your life, right? And you had a moment where you're like, this isn't how I want to work. This isn't how I want to lead this organization and grow Vanguard. And you made a change, and you referred to it as creating like an integrated life. I'd love for you to talk about like what this means to you, and how did you get there?
Yeah. So if I were to think about how my career started, I worked as a management consultant for a long time, which is which has a pretty demanding schedule. And when I think about how I managed my life, I had my work life, which seemed to bleed often into my personal life, but I had my work life. And then I had my personal life, where I was also trying to be a mom, raise kids, and those things felt just very compartmentalized for me. And then when we came and we started the practice, there were certain aspects of it where everything started to bleed together. Because, like, for instance, when we started the practice, and I had a childcare issue, I took one of my kids and I was like, well, you know what? I've just got to take you to work. So I'm going to get you some scrubs. He was 4 or 5 years old at the time. I was like, I'm going to get you some scrubs and a name tag that says hospitality manager. And you can just go to the waiting room and hand out snacks. And so
That's
he
great.
was 5 at the time. His name tag said Caleb Chung, hospitality manager, and he'd go around introducing himself and handing out snacks. And
Love it.
and he turned out okay. He's a junior at Harvard now, so he did okay. So,
Wow.
um, so there was some like forced integration of work and life that happened as we were getting this off the ground. But when I think about things that I truly cared about, even beyond family, there are causes that I care about. Like, for instance, I care a lot about global poverty. And then we started to sponsor a project through our practice. And in 2012, I went and visited that project for the first time. And because that project was around trafficking of children, I saw some really hard things. My heart was completely broken. Uh, my husband was with me. His heart was completely broken. He tore his ACL while we were visiting this project. And so then he was also physically broken. And we came back and we just felt like we can't continue living this way anymore. And instead, we need to just bring it all together. And so we started to run our practice differently. This is when we started to integrate our international work into the practice. This is when we started to do more community stuff, integrate it into the practice. And we said, we need to be the same person caring about the same things, regardless of what setting we're in, whether that's in church, whether that's in our neighborhood, whether that's in our medical practice. We're going to bring our whole self into every setting and every aspect where we are. And so I'll give an example. Like, we come back, my husband's torn his ACL. The project that we were doing in Cambodia around trafficking of kids was fully funded, and we wanted to do something around clean water access. So with his broken ACL or his torn ACL in crutches, he starts telling everyone, hey, we should go start running marathons and half marathons to raise money for clean water. Well, he got most of our medical practice signed on to do this.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
most of our neighborhood. And so we just started to kind of bring everything together and infuse everything that we were doing in the day to day. So that was in 2012. Keep fast forwarding. I think there were different points within the growth of our medical practice that this just kept hitting home for us, that this has all got to be integrated in who we are. And at orientation, I also tell our team members this. I tell them a little bit about what motivates us, everything from our personal background to our faith background, all of that. And then I tell people, I tell you all of this because we bring our whole selves into work, and we want you to do the same thing. We want you to bring your whole self into work.
Mm.
We don't expect you to have the same background as us, whether that's your personal history or whether that's your faith background or your family background. We're all going to come from different places, but we're united under a single mission to make a positive impact on our patients, community, and world. And the only way we can achieve that is if you bring your whole self in. And so that's how I think about living an integrated life. We have three core values. One of our core values is integrity. On one hand, integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one's looking. On the other hand, integrity is also wholeness because it comes from the Latin word integer. And so
Mm,
when you think integer, whole number, it is this consistency around who you are in every setting that you are. And so that's what we hope to
Yeah.
have within the practice. So I hope that for myself.
Mm,
I hope that
yeah.
for team members. I hope that for my kids as they watch the way that we live our
Mm.
lives.
I can,
That's yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
I can imagine for an employee, there's a real sense of trust that they feel right off the bat when you tell them you legitimately want them to bring their whole self to work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because so often it's sort of like it's the opposite of that. It's this is your job responsibility, right? This is the your expectations, and it's here's how we're gonna try to work together. And the reality is like we are people outside of work, and so I could just imagine like how it feels different to be a new employee, at your organization where your posture is, no, I want you to bring your whole self to work.
Yeah.
Which I imagine, I mean, maybe I'm making an assumption here, but I imagine that means that at times, like there's conversations about what's going on at home, right? Or there's more of a sense of what people are going through outside of the workplace, and your team is able to appreciate that and understand their wholeness and be responsive to that. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly? And if so,
Yeah.
would love to, yeah, just
Yeah.
hear a little bit more about what that ends up looking like.
Yeah. Um, there's a question we ask on our team satisfaction survey. And the question is, I have a best friend at work. And to what
Mm-hmm.
extent do you agree with that? I have a
Yeah.
best friend at work. And we get a very high percentage that says, yes, they have a best friend here at work. And I love that because, well, first, we're bringing people together where they have commonality and they feel like they can find a best friend here. In fact, we have two people who are getting married who worked together years ago here. So I love
New
that
heights. Yeah.
connections can be made. And that's only possible if you are bringing your whole self in and you're able to create these types of deep relationships here. The other is I recognize that people are spending the majority of their working hours here with us, not with their family, not with their spouse, but the majority of working hours are here with us. And and I know what it feels like when you feel like your work does not necessarily align with who you are. So if we can bring all of that into alignment where you feel like when I am at work, I am living out my mission of who I am, uh, that's powerful. That's powerful just to have that alignment of who you are and the work that you're doing. Because at that point, it's no longer a job, it's a calling for you.
Mm.
And so I think for us to be able to communicate, this is who we are at Vanguard, and then to invite people in if that resonates with them, um, that's what I'm hoping that we can do for our people.
Lisa, I wonder as you ask people to bring their whole self in, um, have you seen your identity and culture evolve and grow in ways that you have such a clear you and your husband have such a clear sense of mission, but as people open up more of themselves, so I can bring that to the team, there's the I would imagine the potential outcome of your identity growing and evolving as they contribute towards it. Have you seen any of that in any stories or examples of where that's happened?
Yeah. So, yes, because when you ask people to bring their ideas and their whole selves, they have opinions.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right.
So, absolutely. And it's funny because, like, when you ask that question, one of the new things that's just come to mind is like our social media, which I don't manage. And so, really, it's like our team comes up with stuff. I'll look at things sometimes, be like, huh, not necessarily me, but you know what? Yeah, I guess that fits, and I'm so glad people are bringing their ideas and doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a small thing. When I look at the other end of it, there are things that folks have brought, which they feel like, you know what, this lines up with my passion, and this is something that I would like to do, and it's great. I love seeing that. So different examples of that, like we had a doctor who also cares about rural medicine, and he said, "Can we go even further? Like, can my team and I just like pack up, go drive out 2 hours and go to these other communities?" And we said, "Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely. We will back that. So let's do
Mm,
that." And we have a doctor who cares a lot about, we have something called our pre-health program. These are high achieving college grads who will work with us for 1 to 3 years before they go to medical school, PA school, nursing school. And we have a doctor who just cares a lot about investing in people. And so he said, "Hey, can I start to do this?" And start to lay out different things that he wanted to do and to invest in our people. And we said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it." And so there's so much where people bring in things that they're passionate about that align with who we are that I wouldn't necessarily have come up with, that have been a beautiful part of our practice.
that's so great. I mean, I think we know from experience that when leaders are able to do that, it just creates a deeper sense of buy-in and excitement about the work that they're committed to and doing. So, not surprised to hear that based on all that you've shared about the strong identity at Vanguard, but that's really amazing. Um, Maybe another question for you here, Lisa, is in you're going on 17 years here of growing from you and your husband to 150 employees. I'm sure you faced a few challenges along the way. What was one that was maybe unexpected that was surprising to you, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah. COVID was a big one.
Mm,
Um,
for
that
you,
was really
yeah,
big
especially. I can't imagine.
because first, you don't expect shutdowns to affect you when you're in healthcare, but it definitely affected us because the way that essential medical services got defined, we actually had to stop probably 80% of the services that we were offering. And so we were taking care of patients who had melanoma, a metastatic form of skin cancer, but most other skin cancer surgeries we had to cancel. And
Mm,
so imagine what that's like for the patient.
mhm,
And these are skin cancers that may not be metastatic, but they're locally destructive that are eating into bone and tissue. And so we had to cancel all of those surgeries. So that was very challenging from a patient standpoint of having to communicate that with patients. The other thing that was challenging is as all of this was happening and we realized, oh, we're about to lose over 80% of what we're offering, which means there also goes all of our revenue. And this was, and we didn't know how long the shutdown was going to last. It was a 6-week shutdown period. We didn't know how long this was going to last. And this was before um, the unemployment benefits were coming out, any of those packages were coming out. And so we just had to make decisions very quickly during that time around what we were going to do. And so I remember calling a meeting and it started with myself, my husband, one of our senior physicians, and we could see the writing on the wall. I'd already run all the cash flow forecasts and just kind of what this would mean from a business standpoint.
mhm,
And we made the decision of, you know what, let's see if we can do this without furloughing or laying off any of our staff. So let's not do any mandatory furloughs or layoffs. Let's see how long we can carry our team. And it just means all of us, we're going to go without pay and let's try to carry this. And then the next day we met with our physician team. They overwhelmingly decided that as a group, they would take 60 to 80% pay cuts. And I remember at the end of it, one of the doctors said, just keep my team employed.
mm,
And so
mhm,
that happened. Then the next day, all of our nurse practitioners and PAs met, and they voluntarily took pay cuts. Managers the day after that, and then I called an all practice Zoom meeting on a Sunday, which I'd never done before, and
mhm.
we'd never been on Zoom before. Most people didn't know what it was at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we announced, tomorrow when you walk in, you're going to see empty schedules because we have started to move patients. And I said, and then this is what we've chosen to do as a leadership team, but it's not enough. And so, if any of you are willing to raise your hand and voluntarily get furloughed, that would be helpful. Or, but if you really need to keep working, we will keep you working. So, in the end, the majority of our team raised their hand in one way or another. We had some people
Wow.
say, you know what, I'm just going to go stay with my parents. And so just furlough me. We had other people who said, I can do a little bit of a cutback on hours. And
Hmm.
I told the whole team, there, for most of you, there's literally no work. Like there's nothing for us to do. But as long as you're flexible, I will keep you working, whether that's like cleaning out storage rooms or whatever it is. Like I will keep you working. So so that's how we got through it as a team in terms of taking care of each other.
All right.
And then we made a decision that because we had all this extra labor, let's start doing virtual visits and let's start offering free virtual visits to people who now have financial need because they've been furloughed or laid off.
All right.
And so we started to do some of that and offering pro bono care. And we made it through that period as a team. So I think about that because it's one of those moments where we had no idea if we were going to survive it or not.
All
And
right.
we also had the decision of when we talk about mission and values, do we
Mhm.
really mean it? And when
Yeah.
we talk about taking care of each other as a team, do we really mean it? And I saw it happen across our team. And so, I hope we never have anything like that again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because we did, I feel like, okay, this is like, we don't just say it. Our mission values, it's not just words on a wall, but when
Mhm.
it comes time and it costs us something, our team will actually step forward and do something. So yeah, that's what comes to mind for me when you ask that question.
Yeah. I love it. It's another example of what is true when we default to trust, right? Like I just think about the decision that you made around how you invited people into the furloughing, sort of
Yeah.
decision there. And your default was like, we trust that people will, act in ways that are sort of both best for themselves, but also the organization and try to find this balance. And that can be so
Yep.
hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There, yeah, so much wisdom in your approach here. Um, Lisa, you've got this rich experience leading people, leading teams. I'd be interested to know what, if anything, you've changed your mind on over the years.
Mm, that's a great question. You know what? If I think about my early days as a manager, prior to when we started Vanguard, uh, I did not know mission mattered as much as
Mm,
I think now. And part of it was I was at a firm where people were very motivated.
mhm,
And just to kind of give you a snapshot of the extent to which I've changed. So I worked at a firm where people were very motivated. We also worked a lot of hours. And then I come here and we open Vanguard. And coming out of my prior background, I actually thought, I'm a really good manager. I used to get really great satisfaction scores. I won an award as I was leaving of like a people award of how I invest in people. So I thought pretty highly of myself of, yeah, I'm a good manager. Okay, then we come out and we open this practice and I'm used to working super hard. I come here, I continue working super hard. And then one of my team members quits with really no notice, like just quits and writes this letter about how terrible I am to work for. And,
wow.
uh, and whenever I get negative feedback, I try to think to myself, like, what is it I can learn from this experience? And so as I was reading this, I thought, okay, there are some things in here that are unreasonable, but there are also things in here where I need to really internalize this because I think I had this sense of like, uh, a certain type of drive and work ethic. And
Mhm,
also, I didn't clearly articulate here's why we're doing what we're doing. Here's why it's important. Here's why we stay late and take care of patients. And I was not doing a good enough job just articulating these things. And so this person couldn't really see the connection. And so,
yeah.
so that shifted quite a bit for me. And I eased up a little bit in terms of work hours.
Yeah.
So I think that helps too.
Oh, that's powerful. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Lisa, that reminds me. I think one of the things we've observed in our work is that almost all teams, I don't know, complain about communication not being where they want it to be. But if you kind of prod a little bit on what they're talking about, it often is what you just described, where it's not the what that they're wondering about or have issue with, but they don't understand some of the why behind some of the things, right? And you just explain, you realize that, like, with this feedback, and you were like, well, I haven't been doing as good of a job as I could explaining, the why, the mission behind some of the reasons we do what we do. So yeah, maybe just a note for our listeners is, like, when sometimes when you hear about communication frustrations, it's not that people don't know what to do. Sometimes they're actually saying in a unclear way, like, I want to understand more about why we do what we do, or why this process exists the way it does. So you were and by the way, just uh, I think there's also an incredible lesson for our listeners, for everybody, for Joe and I too, to even when we get feedback that's hard to hear and maybe not in the most compassionate form, it's
Mhm.
still worth looking at and saying, like, is there still an opportunity for me to grow in here, which you did, which I think is really rare.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So last question here, Liesel. This question we ask everybody that comes on the podcast, Liesel, and it's to think of the best teammate that you've ever had. You don't have to name this person if you don't want to, totally up to you. But we'd love to hear what characteristics did they embody that made you think of them as being such a great teammate?
Well, I have an unusual situation where I work with my husband.
Yeah.
And so, of course, when you say best teammate, he comes to mind right away.
Yeah.
Um, but the characteristic that I think of is common across just teammates in general who I've really valued. And it is something here that we call public fan, private critic.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is this is the person where in public, they have your back.
mm,
But in private, they will be very honest with you and will have the hard conversations with you. And I think this is true in work relationships and in just personal relationships as well. When you have a relationship where you know, oh, publicly this person's a fan of me, and but privately they'll have the hard conversations with me, you start to trust them
mm.
because you know that they have your best interests in mind. And so I would say it's that someone who can be a public fan, private critic, because the last thing you want is for that to be flipped, right?
Yeah,
Where privately they're your fan, publicly they're your critic,
yeah.
but instead, it's public fan, private critic. So I try to be that for people in my life as well, just professionally and personally.
That's great. Is there anything that you can think of that when if a couple people come to mind that do that well, that, there's some people in my life I can think of that might offer me criticism even privately, and I might not be so eager or willing to take it, right? And others that I would, really appreciate. Is there, what would you say is the thing that those people maybe have done that have made it easier for you to receive that feedback in private?
Yeah. Well, kindness always helps whenever it's
Hmm.
constructive criticism.
Yeah.
But also, I recognize that with my position as the CEO of this organization, it is really hard for my people to come in and give me constructive criticism.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so when I know they're a public fan of me and they step into my office and they have something to say, I'm going to listen because I know how hard it was for them to even come in and to be able to offer this to me. I think it's also true of friendships. I think for friends too, it's hard to have to give each other hard messages. And so if I have a friend who says, I need to talk to you about something, and they give me that feedback back, I recognize the hurdle that they have to overcome to do that. And I think once you start to see that, you recognize what they're about to say to me is really valuable. And they're doing it because they feel like I need to hear it.
Yeah. What I love about both sort of sides of this coin is that, like, both communicate care.
Yeah.
Like, when I heard you say the public fan, I felt support, like
Yeah.
the sports metaphor of, like, I feel supported by this person, right? They care about me. But the same holds true inside of that private conversation as well when they're bringing that criticism, which, as you point out, especially if it's sort of coming to a leader, is very hard to do, right? Or if it's coming
Very.
from a friend, but if it's coming from a colleague as well, like, we all know how challenging that can feel, even within the right conditions, to actually deliver that sort of constructive feedback. But when somebody takes the time to do that in a thoughtful way, just how much care that communicates.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
I love this.
Yeah, and
Just
you're
team
and
equality.
Liesl, you're coming from a place of empathy, which is so powerful, and I think it's such a strong reminder for all of us when somebody is delivering us feedback, especially if they're moving up like organizational structure, power or real power structure. Even if you're a person who doesn't see much of that, like it exists and it's a lot to overcome, and you're first saying, regardless of what they say, I'm going to try and understand that it was difficult to do this, and that if they're doing it, it means they probably care about me, right? Because it's hard. Why would I do something hard just to
Yeah.
if I didn't care for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And then if there's something in that feedback that just really bothers you, then there's also the step of why does this bother me as much as it does? Uh, and usually it does if there's some sort of truth to it or it's
Mhm.
triggering something else. And
Yeah.
so so
Right.
it's almost this makeup of, I mean, why is this bothering me?
That I love that, just curiosity. The default there for so many of us, including myself, would be that part of the feedback's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
just that's bothering me because it's wrong, right? As opposed to like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what's going on there? Like, why is that really bothering me, right? And really like seeking to understand what's going on there for you. I love that. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's so great. Well, Lisa, as we wrap up here, is there anything you would like to promote? And then I'd love it if you could tell our audience where people might be able to find you.
Yeah, sure. Oh, anything I could promote. Okay, well, I come from a dermatology practice, so I would have to tell people that if you have not had a skin exam in the last year, you need to go get a skin exam. Skin cancer, it is absolutely curable and treatable if detected early. So tell all of your
Mm,
listeners that.
okay.
And then if there's anything where you say, I would love to find out how I can integrate mission
Mm.
into my practice or international work into my practice, those are conversations that I love having. So I would be happy to have those conversations. You can find me on LinkedIn. So just look for my name, Leisle Chung. You can find me on LinkedIn. And in terms of our practice and info about what we do, you can go to vanguardskin.com.
Liesl, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been such a fun conversation. We're so grateful for you for being here. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Leading Together. If you found it valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leadership teams discover these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. And as always, you can find more resources at sixlevers.co, including how to sign up for our newsletter, which we send out every Tuesday morning. Thank you.